Greetings, everyone. Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail, and welcome to the latest episode of Mondays in MMORPGs. If I'm not mistaken, this is episode 49. Let me confirm that real quick. I should have confirmed that before I started recording, but this is just how I roll. I don't usually have detailed
Hello
show
everyone.
notes or anything like
Well,
that. I just go ahead and roll with things as I chat. Yep, this is episode 49. Last week we talked about, you know, should an MMORPG be called an MMORPG anymore, considering, you know, the games are not really massively anymore in terms of multiplayer. There's no required grouping elements outside of maybe raids. But this week I want to talk about NFTs, but in a different way. So NFTs have been making, a big kind of a ruckus recently in the development space, not just with MMORPGs, but also in the single player space as well. And we've talked about this multiple times on the Looking for More show, which I am doing with Simmerg and Nathan Napalm on Thursdays. And the general consensus is that we can see a handful of companies who are doing it legitimately, right? But then there's a whole bunch of people who are doing it in a very shady manner and scamming people and literally running off with money and so on and so forth. Um, and it's gotten so far or so bad so far that you can look at, say, Valve completely banning the sale of any sort of NFT products on the Steam platform. And then directly after that, Epic making an announcement that we will gladly take all of your NFT games, despite the fact that Sweeney was in the public just earlier this year talking about how he didn't think that NFT games and blockchain games were, you know, kind of looking at those as being illegitimate types of projects. But also, you can see companies like Ubisoft. Ubisoft has made a commitment in its recent earnings call to the development of blockchain based games, and they have actually invested in and are helping prop up this company that is all about developing blockchain based games that deal with NFTs and everything else, which spins us back around to, are NFTs a legitimate thing? And my brother and I, this is where this conversation is going to take a turn, a weird turn, because if you know me, you'll know that for the past few months on the Looking for More show, I have been heavily critical of the NFT market because of all the scams that are going on with these blockchain games. And you can go watch guys like Kira over at Kira TV. He covers a lot of blockchain games and NFTs and these scam projects and so on and so forth. And I have joked about them a lot because, I recently, I guess it's been like 3 or 4 months ago now, I had an interview with a potential client, somebody that said they wanted to perhaps work with me on a project. And when I sat down for the interview and we went over things, um, they said that they wanted to do a blockchain based, NFT based game, but their reasoning was all wrong. Their reasoning was, they said, we're not going to be able to get money on Kickstarter because Kickstarter is ruined for MMORPGs. So the only way that I'm going to be able to get money is if I go to NFTs and blockchains because that's something that's new. And so everyone wants in on it. And that's how we're going to make our money. And I went, you're going about this all wrong. You need to build a product first. And then when you have your product, that's when you can figure out what you're going to be doing for funding after you've got your prototype built. And it might be NFTs and blockchain, and it might be investors, it might be a publisher, it might be other things. But you can't just have in your mind that you're going to go do NFTs and blockchain because that's how we're going to make all the money, because that's not necessarily true. But my brother came back to me recently. There's a couple of people that he follows in the investment space who are traditional investors. And these are individuals who are in their 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and they've been investors for 30 plus years, and they have very good portfolios. And they did some recent coverage of blockchain games and NFTs, and both of these individuals were talking about that getting into things like cryptocurrency and blockchain and NFTs right now is kind of like the Wild West. That's good and bad. It's bad because there's not a lot of regulation, and you can lose money through scams and other things. It's also good in the sense that there's not a lot of regulation because if you get in on it early, you stand to make a lot of money. And so, from an investor's point of view, they're looking at it as this gold mine of opportunity. But there's a lot of caveats to this. The number one caveat being you have to be able to pick the right horse. And that requires a ton of research and looking into legitimate NFT blockchain companies, ones that actually have funding behind them, legitimate people behind them, as opposed to just these random people who are like, I've got a bunch of art that I want to sell and I'm going to become super rich because I want to sell NFTs and become blockchain rich. Um, but as we were having this conversation, it got me to thinking about how technically the idea of NFTs or things which we can participate in, profit sharing ventures, um, have been around for a while. And let me look this up real quick. Um, because I could be, I'm double checking. There's some articles from back in 2008. Oh, those are dead links. Okay. So back in the day, and I'm going to say this is early 2000s, EverQuest 2 was the first game out there that I can remember of, the first MMORPG to take advantage of the real-time market. So up until that point, a lot of people would buy and sell gold and buy and sell items, and they would do it through third-party services. And gold farmers and gold sellers and things of that nature were frowned upon by a very long time by all of the developers out there because they couldn't, it just that ruined the game from a certain point of view. Um, it would ruin the economy. It would make certain items, be too common when they should be rare and not easily attainable and so on and so forth. But the reality was that that market just kept growing leaps and bounds until when it started getting into the billions of dollars per year worth of revenue. This is when Sony stood up and said, hang on a second, we need to be taking advantage of it. Because one thing I want to think about for a minute is back in the day, like the buying and selling of accounts was a big deal as well. You would have an account, level up a character, and then you could turn around and sell that. But now, rather than have that, these companies have just created a level boost. You pay money and you can have a max level character. It's funny how things like that used to be considered illegal, and now every company out there offers that type of service where you could literally log into the game for the first time and have never played it ever, and you can have a max level character just by paying a little bit extra money. Um, but what I want to talk about really quick is the idea of NFTs and objects or items in game, because don't worry about the technical side of NFTs for a minute. Let's just what they are at their core is a digital item that multiple people own and share ownership of, if you want to look at it that way. This is a very generic description of that. And then people can share in the profit of said item as it's sold or goes up in value and so on and so forth. But they're not really that new when you think about it, because back in the day, EverQuest 2 launched what were known as exchange servers, or I think back in the day it was just the first exchange server. It's really hard to find information about these things these days because the station servers no longer exist. But I do have an article here from July 20th of 2005 on Sony's website. It says today we here at Sony are excited to announce the launch of Station Exchange, the official and secure marketplace for EverQuest 2. Players are transferring and creating new characters on 2 new servers, Shadowhaven and the Bazaar, and auctions are beginning. We invite you to take a look at this groundbreaking new service and check out the live auctions. We would like to thank all the pre-launch participants for their help and feedback as we put the finishing touches on the Station Exchange user experience. Now, the way this worked, and it's been a long time, so I'm remembering this. I could be remembering it slightly incorrectly. Again, 2005. That's a long time ago. That's 16 years ago. But the basic premise was that Sony said, well, if we can't combat the exchange of real items for or real money for items and services in the games, and we just need to do it ourselves so that we can cut the third person out of that and we can get our own share of that billion-dollar market. So they started the exchange server where you could buy and sell items for real money, but they were only on a couple of servers. It wasn't every single server that Sony had for EverQuest 2. It was these specific servers. You could do it here. It's approved here. And the way it worked was basically, as I recall, and I could be off. If I'm off on this, let me know in the comments below. But as I recall, you could do all that, and Sony just got a cut of all of that. So buyers and sellers are profiting from each other, and behind the scenes, Sony is saying, feel free, do all that stuff. We're just going to take a little cut of the pie each time you do it because it's our game, our servers, our character art, our everything. That's essentially what NFT blockchain type games are all about. The sharing, the buying, selling, trading, and sharing of digital assets that multiple people own or participate in the profit sharing of. So it's actually not that new of a concept. It's just being done in such a way that it seems quite new and quite different. And when I sat down and talked with my brother about this the other day, and I got back to thinking about EverQuest 2 and the exchange servers, I kind of had the light bulb go off in my head and went, damn, this is actually not that different from what it was 15, 20 years ago. It's just something, it's a new way of doing it. And so there's a lot of knee jerk reaction around it. And also because it's scary. It can be scary because of all the scams that have happened around this. I think the most recent one that I can think of was I'm gonna look up the name real quick. Something Gorillas. Uh, Evolved Apes. So I'm gonna go look up this article because I think it was like 2.7 million or something like that. It was a collection of 10,000 unique NFTs trapped inside a lawless land. Fighting for survival, only the strongest ape will prevail. And then just a week after the Evolved Ape had launched, the anonymous developer behind the project disappeared, went dark on social media, and deleted the official Twitter page and website and took the wallet with him. Now, the tricky part about this is that from a legal standpoint, everybody got what they paid for. They got their NFTs. They got their gorilla NFTs, their ape NFTs. But what they didn't get was something else that was sort of alluded to during the project was that, we're also going to spin up a game at the end of this, above and beyond the NFTs. So here's the interesting thing. Each of the apes netted 4% in royalties. So I mean, everybody made money. People got paid. People own these NFTs. There was profit sharing and everything else. But at the end of the day, what happened is the creator and everything disappeared and took the wallet with him. So all those principal tokens, all that money went with him and disappeared into the ether. By the way, that's a joke on the ether, by the way. So those kind of scams exist and are the reason why a lot of people look at NFTs and blockchain games as being something that shouldn't necessarily, it's scary. And I've talked about this, I think, on a previous episode of this show as well, talking about the dangers of NFT projects and blockchain games. And I think that that's very important to keep in mind because there is no regulation. So before you ever consider putting money down, and this is something that my brother and I talked about the other day because the investors that he listens to and those people are talking about how, like any other venture, you should never put money into something like blockchain or NFTs, unless it's money that you can afford to lose. Because investment money, that's what investment money is. It's money that you might not ever get back, but you're putting it into something with the hope, or in many cases, based upon educated guesswork, that this is going to be something that will be successful enough to at least net you a little bit of profit so that your money is working for you as opposed to you always having to working for your money. So everybody always talks about this. It's like no matter what you're going to invest in, whether it's NFTs, blockchain, stocks, futures, forex, or anything else, um, you need to be okay with potentially losing that money if you're going to invest it. But at the end of the day, diving into NFTs and blockchain and then looking back at like the old station exchange servers for EverQuest 2, it's really not a new concept. It's something that has come it's cycled back around again now 15 20 years later, and it's back in the open space because I don't remember how long the station exchange servers lasted, but I seem to recall them only lasting a few years at most. Um, and I don't know. I'm trying to look here real quick. There's some like I don't know if do the exchange servers still exist? Maybe they do, and I'm just not aware of it because I haven't played on EverQuest 2 in so long. If this exchange server still exists, let me know in the comments below, please, because I'm looking real quick. Um, EQ2 servers. Very curious now. Server types. There's the free trade server, but this is a little different. I don't see those exchange servers still available. Maybe they are, and I'm just not looking in the right place. I would love to hear from somebody who knows more because this is just something that it came up in conversation recently, and I wanted to do an episode about it because I was like, wait a second, didn't we used to do that? Because I remember, when they launched, it was a big deal because everybody accused EverQuest of selling out, being like, oh, you're going to start allowing gold sellers and people to buy and sell real items. And it's like, well, yeah, why not? Like, it's a it's billions of dollars a year that we're not getting a revenue cut of, and it's our intellectual property. We should be the ones profiting from that. So yeah, we're gonna try to figure out a way to tap into that. I don't know. My brother, the thing that he brought up as I bring this up to a close was he said, we were looking at our Star Wars: The Old Republic characters, and as an example, he had some legacy items on one of his characters that he sold on the galactic market for like 100 million credits, which might sound like a lot, but on an old server like the one we're on, it's not a lot of credits. It's the inflation is so crazy on the server. But he was looking at that going, what if these really old mounts that I have that are no longer available, right? And this could apply to EverQuest 1. Think about the old Ranger armor, the red armor. I don't remember what it's called anymore. Things of that nature. Thinking about really old legacy items in MMORPGs. If that was a if that digital item was an NFT shared by the person who had it along with whoever else, and you could buy and sell those legacy items like that, those things could be worth hundreds if not thousands of dollars to the right person. I can remember back in the day, an account was sold with that ranger or that red ranger armor, $10,000. That was a big. It was like 2001, 2002, something like that. Um, it was a big deal. It made all the news outlets at the time. Somebody paid 10,000 US dollars to buy an account that had a Ranger with all of that gear on it. And that was, 20 some years ago. So it's pretty amazing to think about the fact that those, the buying and selling of digital assets was happening 20 years ago, and now we're talking about it as if it's something new and different. It's really not. It's just a different way of doing things. So it's food for thought. I'm going to be doing more research on um, NFTs and blockchain. I mean, you have to at this point because they're not going away. They're becoming more prevalent. And even though there are a lot of scams still going on, there's a lot of legitimate companies spring up, like the company that Ubisoft is backing to develop blockchain games. So when you have a legitimate enterprise taking part in it, that's when you kind of have to stop and say, hold on, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, I should be paying attention to this, and I should maybe not look at it in such a skeptical light. I mean, it's good to be skeptical. It's healthy to be skeptical, but it's also not healthy to be so skeptical that you just won't buy into something because you don't agree with it or you don't understand it. So I think it's very important to pay attention to that. I'm still not a fan of all these people who are trying to do NFTs and blockchain games because it's such an easy way to make money because there's no regulation and I can't go to Kickstarter because my idea is not good enough, but I can do it on blockchain. I'm never going to support those types of projects ever. If your product isn't good enough to be backed on Kickstarter, if your product isn't good enough to be backed by an investor or backed by a bank or backed by a publisher, then it's not going to automatically be good enough to become an NFT hit. You know what I mean? It needs to be a legitimate product in and of itself. But when I look at established companies getting into the game, that's when I have to look at it and go, food for thought. Might be time to start looking at the right companies and figuring out if you want to invest some money into these places. Anyway, that's today's episode of Mondays in MMORPGs. Stick around. Next episode will be episode 50, which is a pretty big milestone. So hopefully you'll tune in for that. Don't forget to watch the rest of the episodes in this playlist if you check here on YouTube, and also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon if you want updates like this in the future. And I'll see everybody in the next episode. Stay safe.